Jane Fonda says her father slapped her for saying a racial slur. And she says it worked, by the way. Here it is.
I didn't know racism until I went to Greenwich. That was the first time I ever heard the N-word. And I repeated the N-word once, and the only time in his life that my dad's whacked me across the face. He said, "Don't you ever say that word again." Oh my God.
Let's put it up full mass. That was a hell of a story, a hell of a reflection. Jane Fonda is in her 80s and remembers that slap from back then. Reflected and shared a pivotal moment in her upbringing. It was a recent appearance on actress Kerry Washington's Street You Grew Up On podcast. It's a great podcast, by the way. The 86-year-old Jane Fonda talked about a hard lesson she learned as a child about racism that likely planted the seed that would lead to her decades of activism. One of which included the only time her father ever struck her. The monster-in-law star recalled that when her father married Susan Blanchard, a Jewish socialite and stepdaughter of musical theater director and composer Oscar Hammerstein II, her world became more lively and diverse. At the time, Henry and his second wife were living in Connecticut, a world away from LA, where Jane and her brother, Peter, had primarily been raised. She, Blanchard, had African-American friends. And for the first time, I got to know Jeffrey Holder, who I now realize I always thought of him as a dancer, but someone just gave me a book of his artwork. He was a great artist, Fonda said. When Washington asked if the Hollywood vet did not know of Holder's array of talents because she had not been immersed around Black people during her adolescent years in LA, Jane responded, no, not at all. Not exposed to people of color at all. Atlanta Black notes that while Jane grew in notoriety by following in her late father, Henry Fonda's active footsteps, it is her outspoken activism, opposition to matters like the Vietnam War, injustices against people of color, and other social causes like ending the stigma around HIV/AIDS that has become a cornerstone of her legacy. The two-time Oscar winner even revealed that as a child, her grandfather, this was so interesting, her grandfather forced her father to watch the lynching of Willie Brown, whose body was dragged around the town square in Omaha, Nebraska during 1919 Red Summer race riots. She elaborated, quote, "That had a huge impact on my father, inspiring him to make films like The Oxbow Incident, 1943, The Wrong Man, 1956, and 12 Angry Men in 1957. He cared about injustice and he hated racism. And you know, with that slap, taught me to pay attention," noted the celebrated actress. Jane's history of speaking up about injustice also included being a supporter of the Black Lives Matter movement when George Floyd was murdered. The killing some have likened to a modern day lynching. There's always a cause and effect. There's a why. There's a seed planted somewhere. This was a phenomenal story. And when you look at what her father experienced, he could have adopted the energy that he received from his father, or he could have decided, as he did, to transmute that energy, to transform it into something else. And that's what he did. And look how he changed so many things after that moment. Sharon, thoughts here?
You know me, I don't believe in raising a hand at a child, but I am so grateful Henry Fonda did land that slap across Jane's face, because it altered for her what Greenwich had tried to instill in her and gave us this woman of many decades who has remained true. And I applaud that. And I think that there's a pivotal moment a lot of times for all, sometime in your life. And as you mentioned, for Henry Fonda, he would have never become perhaps the man he did had he not experienced that trauma, that incredible trauma.
Yeah. So ironic and interesting.